What if the very skills you once used to protect lives became the only weapon you had left to protect your own? Under a burning streetlight in a forgotten city corner, a black soldier returns from war carrying more scars inside than out. He wants silence, peace, a second chance. But peace is stolen when a ruthless gang leader drags him into a world he left behind. Violence, humiliation, survival. The soldier's fists, once disciplined for honor, now tremble with the weight of memory, rage, and a desperate fight for dignity. The bus hissed as its doors folded open, spilling a gust of stale, recycled air into the night. Marcus Hale stepped down onto the cracked pavement, boots heavier than he remembered, duffel bag clutched to his side like a lifeline. The city smelled of gasoline, burnt rubber, and fried food drifting from a late-night stand across the street. Neon signs flickered in uneven rhythms, glowing red and green on walls scarred with graffiti. This was supposed to be home, but home had become a stranger. He paused under the humming light of a street lamp, its glow sputtering like it might die any second. Shadows stretched long, fractured, crawling over the broken sidewalk like restless ghosts. Marcus pulled his jacket tighter, though the night wasn't cold. It was the kind of pull you make when you feel eyes on you, a subconscious armor. His chest rose and fell in slow, deliberate breaths, the same measured rhythm he had used overseas when panic clawed at the edges of his mind. The city hadn't waited for him. Storefronts he remembered as bright and proud now sat boarded up. His mother's old house was only 3 blocks away, but every step forward felt like crossing enemy lines. He imagined the hallway where she used to stand, arms folded, voice stern yet soft, telling him to wash up before dinner. He wanted to see that kitchen light, warm and golden, cutting through the dark. But she was gone, years gone, and the house, it belonged to someone else now. Marcus shifted the duffel bag higher on his shoulder. The medals tucked inside rattled faintly, bits of metal heavier than stone, heavier than guilt. They clinked like reminders, each one etched with stories he didn't want to tell. A child's laughter drifted from down the block, quick and fleeting, followed by silence. That silence echoed in him, in the hollow places where camaraderie used to live. He missed the voices of his brothers in arms, the ones who had filled long nights with jokes and curses, with the comfort of knowing someone always had your back. Now, he had only the sound of his own footsteps. A car rolled past slowly, its tires whispering against the road. The bass thumped low from its speakers, rattling windows, vibrating the ground beneath his boots. He kept his gaze low, watching the cracks in the pavement, but his body tensed all the same. He felt the shift of air, the eyes from inside the car studying him. The engine growled, lingered, then faded down the block. Still, Marcus's pulse stayed high, his body locked in that familiar state of readiness. Fight or flight. It never left. Not even here. He found himself outside a corner store, its fluorescent lights humming like insects. A flicker of memory pressed into his chest. He had stood here as a teenager, buying cheap sodas with crumpled bills, laughing with friends who'd since vanished into the city's underbelly. Tonight, a different crowd lingered. 2 men in hooded sweatshirts, leaning against the wall, eyes sharp, watching everything. They didn't move. They didn't have to. Their silence was loud enough. Marcus adjusted his pace, steady, calm, not too fast, not too slow. He could feel their eyes burning into his back even as he crossed the street. The air grew heavier with every step. The city felt, but less like a neighborhood and more like a battlefield. Every corner a blind spot, every shadow a possible threat. And yet, there was something deeper gnawing at him. Something inside. Loneliness was one thing, but the gnawing was fear. Fear that he didn't belong here anymore, that war had stripped him of whatever piece of himself made this city home. A street lamp flickered again above him, buzzing like it might burst. He stopped beneath it, tilting his head back to the sky. Clouds rolled in thick and low, swallowing the stars. The air pressed damp against his skin, heavy with the promise of rain. In that moment, with the light sputtering above and the street stretching empty ahead, Marcus felt utterly small. A soldier who had crossed deserts, dodged bullets, buried brothers. And yet, here, he was just another man alone under a dying light. Then he heard it. A car engine. Slow. Approaching. Not from ahead. From behind. The sound crawled up the street like a predator, unhurried, certain. Marcus didn't turn at first. His breath caught, shoulders tightening. He knew that rhythm, the low growl of an engine pacing him. His throat went dry. When he finally turned, the headlights cut across him, bleaching his shadow from the pavement. The car didn't speed past this time. It slowed, gliding to a stop just feet away. Inside, silhouettes moved. He couldn't see their faces, but he didn't need to. The energy told him enough. The trap had already closed, and he was standing in its center. The car door opened with a slow creak, the kind of sound that carried a weight of intention. Marcus shifted his stance slightly, planting his boots firm on the cracked ground. The night around him seemed to pause, even the buzzing street lamp above faltering into silence for a heartbeat. Then came the slam. Heavy. Deliberate. A figure stepped out. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, his hoodie shadowing most of his face, but Marcus caught the glint of gold teeth when he smirked. Two more emerged behind him, younger, restless energy sparking in the way they bounced on their feet. They weren't drunk, they weren't high. This was something else. Hunger, the thrill of finding someone who didn't belong. "Yo!" the gold-toothed man called, his voice carrying easy across the empty street. "Look at this. Fresh meat." The younger ones chuckled, though their eyes stayed fixed, sharp and unblinking. Marcus didn't move. He'd learned in combat that stillness was its own kind of power, a silent reminder that you weren't prey. But inside, he felt that familiar tension rising, coiling tight in his chest, ready to spring if it had to. He said nothing. Silence had kept him alive more times than words ever did. Gold Teeth stepped closer, his sneakers scraping against the grit. He looked Marcus up and down, eyes narrowing when they caught the duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "What you got in there, old man? Don't tell me you're Santa come early." The younger ones laughed harder, the sound jagged, bouncing off the walls of boarded-up shops. Marcus's hand tightened around the strap of the bag. He felt the edge of the medals pressing through the canvas, sharp against his ribs. Memories sparked, uninvited. Flashes of sand, blood, a body in his arms. He blinked, grounding himself back into the cold concrete reality before him. He spoke, finally, his voice low but steady. "Just passing through." The man tilted his head, mock curiosity etched into the gesture. "Passing through where? Don't look like you from here." He stepped closer still, his breath now a mix of cigarettes and mint gum. "This block don't like strangers, especially ones who keep secrets." Marcus caught the flicker in the man's eyes, the challenge blooming. He'd seen it before, in barracks, in back alleys, in the desert when suspicion turned lethal. It was the look of someone daring him to give a wrong answer, waiting for the excuse. The younger ones edged wider, forming a loose, half-circle. They weren't just followers, they were sharks circling, their energy reckless, dangerous. The street lamp buzzed back to life, bathing them all in a sickly yellow glow. Shadows stretched and twisted across the asphalt, overlapping until Marcus couldn't tell where one ended and another began. "Listen," Marcus said quietly, evenly. "I don't want trouble." Gold Teeth's grin widened, showing every glinting edge. "That's the thing, soldier boy," he said, spitting the last words like venom. "Trouble already found you." Marcus's chest tightened. The word soldier rang too sharp, too precise.
He hadn't said anything about it, but the duffel, the posture, maybe even the way he carried his silence, it gave him away. Soldiers never stop looking like soldiers, no matter how hard they try. "See," Goldteeth continued, circling slightly, "guys like you, they think they better than us. Walking like you seen things we ain't. Carrying ghosts in that bag." He jabbed a finger toward Marcus's chest. "But here, ain't no medal's gonna save you. Ain't no flag watching your back." The words cut, sharper than fists. Marcus kept his face still, but inside, heat swelled. Anger, guilt, sorrow mixing into something volatile. He'd carried the weight of protecting lives, of fighting battles far from this cracked street, and yet here he stood, stripped down to just another man being measured by predators. The younger one to the left shuffled closer, pulling something from his pocket. The glint of metal flashed, a switchblade catching the flicker of the streetlight. He clicked it open, slow, deliberate, like a warning bell. Marcus's pulse quickened, but his stance didn't falter. His training whispered in the back of his mind. Assess, calculate, breathe. He measured the distance, the angles, the weight of his duffel. Every muscle remembered what to do, even if his soul recoiled from it. Goldteeth leaned in close, voice dropping into a near whisper. "So, soldier, question is, you gonna hand over that bag, or you gonna make me take it?" The air between them thickened, charged. Marcus inhaled, deep, steady. He knew the answer didn't matter. Whatever he chose, this night would end in confrontation. And somewhere, deep in his chest, the soldier he had buried began to stir. Marcus exhaled slowly, letting the night air burn in his lungs. He could smell the damp asphalt, the faint trace of rain drifting closer on the wind. His heart pounded, not from fear alone, but from recognition. This wasn't a random encounter. This was the opening move of something larger. He had felt it overseas, in villages where ambushes began with one question, one taunt. The calm before the explosion. Goldteeth tapped his chest with 2 fingers, leaning so close Marcus could see the thin scar running from his temple into the shadow of his jawline. His grin was wide, confident, but his eyes were testing, probing, hungry for a flinch. Marcus gave him nothing. The younger one with the blade grew restless, pacing in short arcs like a caged animal. "Come on, man," he muttered, the knife catching flashes of yellow light. "Let's just do it. He ain't gonna—" "Shut up!" Goldteeth snapped without breaking his stare from Marcus. The authority in his voice was clear. The others followed his lead, waited for his signal. That, more than anything, told Marcus what he was dealing with. This wasn't just some late-night mugging. This was territory. Control. And he had stepped into it unknowingly. Marcus shifted his duffel slowly, letting it slide from his shoulder to the ground with a dull thud. The medals inside clinked again, faint but audible. Goldteeth's grin faltered for the first time. "What's in there?" he asked, his tone sharpening. "Memories," Marcus said simply. His voice was calm, but the word hung heavy, strange, unsettling even to himself. The younger one laughed harshly, shaking his head. "Man, he talking crazy. Ain't nobody care about his me. Maury's." He stepped closer, blade angled low, ready. Marcus's breath slowed. His training whispered louder now. "Control the center. Redirect force. End it fast." His muscles coiled beneath his jacket, every fiber alive, ready. And yet, he hesitated. He hadn't come here to fight. He'd come home to lay ghosts to rest, not summon new ones. Goldteeth sensed the hesitation and seized it. "Yeah," he said louder now, his voice echoing off the hollow buildings. "This one thinks he's still in the army,
But look around, soldier boy. Ain't no squad watching your back. Just us. And when we done, ain't nobody gonna remember your name." The others laughed, sharp and cruel, their voices filling the night like gunfire. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second, just half, and in that instant, he wasn't on the cracked street anymore. He was back in the desert, sandstorm howling, bullets snapping past, his brother in arms screaming his name. He opened his eyes, and the world steadied again. The knife glinted closer. A siren wailed faintly in the distance, then faded, leaving the street to its silence once more. Marcus finally spoke, low, steady. "You don't want to do this." Gold Teeth laughed, a full, booming sound, head thrown back. The younger ones joined in, their laughter bouncing between the broken walls. Then, with suddenness, the knife-wielding one lunged. Time slowed. Marcus stepped aside, grip snapping the boy's wrist with surgical precision, twisting the blade free before the gang even processed the movement. The knife clattered to the pavement, sliding across the cracked ground. The boy cried out, stumbling back, clutching his wrist. For a second, silence. Shock rippled through the group. Gold Teeth's grin disappeared. His eyes sharpened into something colder, darker. He stared at Marcus, measuring him again, but this time not as prey, as a problem, a challenge. The car door behind them opened again. Another man stepped out, slower, heavier, his presence immediately different. Taller, older, with a scar cutting across his cheek like a lightning strike. His gaze locked on Marcus, unblinking. The younger ones straightened instinctively, falling into silence. Gold Teeth shifted back, almost deferential, his authority yielding to the new arrival. The man stepped closer, boots echoing with weight against the concrete. His voice rolled out low, steady, coiled with menace. "You think you can walk back into this city," he said, every word deliberate, "and make a fool of my people?" Marcus's stomach tightened. This wasn't random anymore. This was personal. This was the leader. The scarred man stopped just a few feet away, his shadow long beneath the failing streetlight. He studied Marcus with eyes that saw through silence, through stillness, straight into the soldier beneath. Then, with a faint, cruel smile, he said, "Welcome home, soldier. You're mine now." The night thickened, heavy with the promise of something Marcus knew too well. War. The scarred man's presence shifted the night. The tension that had crackled between Marcus and the younger thugs now thickened into something heavier, darker, a gravity that pulled every eye toward him. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. Power radiated from the stillness of his stance, the weight in his silence. Marcus recognized that kind of command, the way soldiers had followed leaders into fire, not because they were told to, but because they felt it. The man moved closer, the scar across his cheek catching the dim light. A pale reminder of violence survived. "You carry yourself like a fighter," he said, tone low but cutting. "I can see it in your posture. Military. Discipline. That makes you dangerous." His lips curled slightly. "But danger only has value if it belongs to me." Marcus didn't answer. His fists flexed once at his sides, unclenching slowly. His silence wasn't defiance, it was restraint. But the younger gang members took it as arrogance, their muttering restless, a storm of energy barely contained. The scarred man, Darius the Viper, Marcus would soon learn, tilted his head, studying him like a predator studies prey. "I don't know where you've been," he continued, voice dropping almost to a whisper. "But here, this block, these streets, they answer to me." He gestured around at the hollow buildings, the broken neon lights, the cracked sidewalks. "And if you're here, that means you do too." Marcus felt a cold surge run down his spine. He wanted to say he wasn't here to belong to anyone, that he had no stake in their games,
but his throat locked. The weight of being surrounded pressed against him. One of the younger ones, the one whose wrist Marcus had twisted, spat on the pavement. "He think he better than us. Look at him, walking like he untouchable. We should end him right now." Darius's gaze flicked to the boy, sharp as a blade, and the kid froze, swallowing his words. The power dynamic was clear. The gang didn't breathe without Darius's permission. Then Darius leaned in closer to Marcus. His breath smelled faintly of whiskey, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to giving ultimatums. "You have two choices, soldier. You fight when I tell you to fight, or you bleed when I tell you to bleed. There's no walking away." The words hit Marcus harder than fists. He had faced threats before, commands barked in the chaos of battlefields, ultimatums delivered at gunpoint. But this was different. This wasn't war with rules of engagement, uniforms, or allies. This was a street ruled by fear, where mercy didn't exist. "I don't want trouble," Marcus said, his voice steady but softer than he intended. The words sounded fragile against the weight of the gang's silence. Darius chuckled, shaking his head slowly. "That's the thing about trouble. You don't get to want it or not. Trouble wants you, and it's already found you." The younger gang members' murmurs jeered in agreement, their laughter low, mean, circling like vultures. The knife clattered again as it was picked off the pavement, twirled nervously by its owner. Darius straightened, his gaze never leaving Marcus. "I'll give you till tomorrow night. You show up at the warehouse by the docks. My people will be there. You'll fight. Show me what makes you special. Show me why you think you can walk these streets with your chin high." His tone sharpened, final and unyielding. "Or we come for you. And trust me, soldier, you won't see it coming." Marcus felt his chest tighten, a pressure building behind his ribs. The words weren't just a threat. They were a chain, locking him into a corner with no exit. His instincts screamed to push back, to resist, to vanish into the night. But he knew, deep down, they'd hunt him. This wasn't just intimidation. This was ownership. Darius's smile widened slightly, as if he could read the war inside Marcus's head. He tapped the scar on his cheek with 2 fingers and whispered almost intimately, "Tomorrow night. Don't be late." With that he turned, climbing back into the car. The engine roared to life, headlights sweeping across Marcus one final time before the vehicle rolled away, shadows stretching behind it like a retreating tide. The younger ones followed, glancing back with sneers and laughter, their voices echoing long after they were gone. Marcus stood under the dying streetlight, alone once more. But this time, the silence wasn't empty. It was suffocating, thick with the promise of violence. He bent slowly, lifting his duffel again, the metals inside rattling faintly like chains. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the knowledge of what tomorrow would force him to become. Marcus walked slowly down the block, the hum of the street lamp fading behind him. Each step felt heavier than the last, his duffel digging into his shoulder like a burden he couldn't set down. The city pressed in around him, shuttered storefronts, broken glass glittering in the gutters, the faint rumble of trains somewhere in the distance. Everything looked familiar, yet estranged, like an old friend who no longer remembered his name. His boots scuffed against the cracked pavement. He tried to steady his breath, but the ultimatum echoed in his head, louder than the city noise. Tomorrow night. Fight or bleed. Marcus turned a corner and found himself in front of his mother's old house. The porch light, once warm and golden, was gone. The windows were dark, blinds pulled tight. A rusted chain-link fence leaned to one side, weeds curling through the gaps. The house had been sold years ago, but standing there, Marcus could still hear his mother's voice in the walls. The scolding tone when he came home late, the softer hum when she sang in the kitchen. He reached out and touched the fence. The cold metal bit into his palm. He closed his eyes and saw her face, remembered the night he told her he was enlisting. She had cried quietly, turning her back so he wouldn't see. She knew war would take pieces of him, pieces no medal could ever return. Now he was back, and she was gone, and the streets demanded another war of him. Marcus let the fence go and stepped back. His chest ached with a hollowness that no battle had ever left him with. Overseas, he had fought with purpose. Defend the man beside you, protect the mission, survive for the ones who couldn't. Here, there was no mission. Just violence for its own sake, demanded by men who thrived on fear. He walked on, the city growing quieter, lonelier. The echo of his footsteps seemed to mock him. Every time he closed his eyes, memories intruded. The face of his friend Williams, bleeding out in the desert, gasping for breath while Marcus tried to stop the flow. The words had haunted him every night since. Bring me home. But what did home mean now? A street ruled by gangs? A house that no longer belonged to his family? A city that watched silently as predators claimed it? His duffel thudded against his side with each step, the medals rattling inside like bones in a coffin. He had once thought they were proof of something: honor, sacrifice, survival. Now they felt like iron shackles, binding him to a past he couldn't outrun. He ducked into an alley, sitting on a stack of broken pallets. His hands covered his face, elbows digging into his knees. For a long while he sat there, just listening to the faint drip of water from a leaking pipe, the distant bark of a dog, the laughter of strangers carried faintly from another block. His body trembled. Not from fear, but from the weight of choice. If he showed up tomorrow, he'd break the vow he made to himself on the day he came home. Never again use his training for violence. He had promised to leave that behind, to build something better. But if he didn't show up, he could already imagine Darius's people coming for him in the dark, dragging him into a fight on their terms. And this time innocence might be caught in the crossfire. A soft shuffle of feet pulled him from his thoughts. Marcus raised his head. At the mouth of the alley stood a boy, no older than 12. Skinny frame, oversized hoodie, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. He clutched a backpack to his chest like a shield. "You're the soldier," the boy said, his voice thin but steady. Marcus frowned. "You should head home." The boy shook his head, stepping closer. "Ain't safe out here. Not for you." Marcus felt a bitter smile tug at his lips. "I could say the same to you." The boy hesitated, then whispered, "They're gonna make you fight. I've seen it before. Nobody wins against Darius." His eyes darted nervously down the street. "You should run. Leave before tomorrow." "Run!" The word stabbed Marcus deeper than the threat of violence. He had never run from battle, never abandoned those who needed him. But here, and the thought lingered like poison, maybe escape was the only way to keep his vow. The boy backed away, vanishing into the shadows, leaving Marcus alone again. His words lingered in the night air. "Nobody wins against Darius." Marcus stared at the ground, fists tightening on his knees. He wasn't afraid of losing. He was afraid of what he might become if he won. The city slept uneasily, but Marcus couldn't. He sat on the edge of a low wall in an empty lot, the duffel at his feet, the medals inside clinking faintly whenever he shifted. The sky above was choked with clouds, the moon smothered, stars hidden. Only the faint glow of neon from a liquor store sign flickered in the distance, painting the night in broken, blood-red flashes. He lit no fire, made no sound. His hands rested on his knees, fingers curling, uncurling, restless. Inside his chest, two storms collided. The soldier who had learned to act without hesitation, and the man who wanted only to live quietly, to bury the violence inside him. Darius's voice haunted him. "Fight or bleed." Marcus tilted his head back, closing his eyes. The memories rushed in, too sharp, too vivid. The desert sun blistering above, the sand grinding into his eyes, the deafening percussion of gunfire rattling his bones. He remembered Williams's scream, the smell of iron and dust, the way his own hands were slick with blood he couldn't stop. His eyes snapped open. The night was still, but the ghosts clung to him. He reached into the duffel and pulled out one of the medals, holding it in his palm. The metal was cold, its polished surface reflecting faint glimmers of the red neon. He stared at it until his vision blurred, until the medal no longer looked like honor, but like a cruel reminder. Men had died for him to carry this. And now he was supposed to fight for what? For spectacle? For the amusement of a gang leader with a scar across his face? Marcus clenched the medal in his fist so tightly it bit into his skin. His jaw tightened. "Never again," he whispered to the night. "I swore." But the vow felt fragile, hollow against the reality pressing in. He knew what Darius represented. He'd seen men like him before, warlords overseas who ruled villages through fear, who thrived on power and spectacle. Darius wasn't just testing him. He was setting a stage, making Marcus into a symbol. Either he bent to Darius's command, or he was destroyed as an example. The boy's words returned. Nobody wins against Darius. Marcus breathed in slowly. That might have been true for others, but Marcus wasn't just another man on these streets. He had been forged in fire, trained to survive where death clawed at every shadow. If Darius wanted a fight, he would get one. The question that gnawed at Marcus wasn't, "Can I win?" It was, "What will be left of me if I do?" He dropped the medal back into the bag, zipped it shut, and stood. His legs felt heavy, but his spine straightened. He started walking. No destination in mind, just motion. The streets whispered around him. Distant sirens, a train horn, a dog barking somewhere far away. But inside, the silence was absolute. He passed a shuttered church, its stained glass windows cracked, the door chained shut. For a moment he stopped, staring at the cross etched faintly into the glass. His mother had dragged him to that church as a boy, her voice soft but unyielding. "Faith will carry you where strength can't." Marcus wanted to believe that. But in the world he'd lived through, strength had carried him when faith felt silent. Still, he whispered into the night, "If you're listening, guide me. Just guide me." His voice cracked on the last word, betraying the exhaustion buried beneath his calm exterior. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier, droplets striking his shoulders, his hair, the pavement around him. The city blurred beneath the downpour, neon bleeding into puddles, shadows dissolving. Marcus didn't move. He let the rain soak him, wash over his skin, as though it might cleanse him of the choice looming before him. But the rain couldn't wash away inevitability. Darius had set the stage. The warehouse by the docks would be waiting. Marcus turned and started walking again, his pace steady, deliberate. He didn't know if he was walking toward damnation or redemption, but he knew he couldn't run. Running wasn't who he was. The soldier in him stirred, unwilling but undeniable. And though he hated it, Marcus knew, tomorrow night, that part of him would be unleashed again. The warehouse loomed against the night like a skeleton, its rusted ribs of steel jutting into the black sky. Broken windows stared like hollow eyes, and the air around it carried the stink of oil, mold, and salt from the nearby docks. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the ground still gleamed slick, reflecting the faint glow of street lamps scattered along the pier. Marcus stood across the street, duffel slung over his shoulder, his breath forming clouds in the cool night air. He had walked here with measured steps, each one heavier than the last, each one an argument with himself. Every fibre of him had screamed to turn away, to vanish into the dark and leave this cursed place behind. But his feet had carried him forward. He couldn't run. Not from them, and not from himself. The muffled thrum of bass pulsed from inside the warehouse, faint but insistent, like a heartbeat. Shadows shifted behind the broken glass, voices rising in cruel laughter, anticipation. This wasn't just a fight. This was theatre, a spectacle arranged by Darius to prove a point. And Marcus was the unwilling main act. He stepped closer, his boots crunching against gravel. The sound was too loud in his ears, and suddenly he was back in the desert, sand crunching underfoot, the sting of heat, the metallic taste of adrenaline as orders barked in the distance. He blinked hard, shaking it off, grounding himself in the cold drizzle, the smell of rust. But the ghosts clung stubbornly. At the door, 2 men stood guard, arms folded, their postures loose, but eyes sharp. They recognized him instantly. One smirked, the other spat onto the wet ground. Neither stopped him. That told Marcus everything he needed to know. They weren't worried about him escaping. Darius had made sure of that. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous, the ceiling lost in darkness. Chains hung from the rafters, swaying faintly with the draft that whistled through broken panes. Oil drums ringed the space, some burning with small, crackling fires that spat smoke into the air. The crowd had already gathered. Men and women pressed shoulder to shoulder, faces eager, some cruel, some weary, all expectant. The moment Marcus stepped in, the murmurs started. Whispers slithered through the crowd, heads turning, eyes fixing on him. The soldier. He heard the word carried from one mouth to another, as though it were a curse or a promise. He kept his face calm, but the sound gnawed at him. Soldier. He wasn't one anymore. Not here. Not now. A circle had been cleared in the center, the floor slick with old stains. The crowd leaned in around it, waiting. On the far side, Darius stood with his arms folded, his scar gleaming in the firelight. His eyes locked on Marcus the moment he entered. "Right on time," Darius said, his voice booming above the chatter. "Our guest of honor." The crowd erupted into cheers, jeers, whistles. The noise was suffocating, pressing against Marcus's chest. He felt sweat bead along his hairline despite the cool air. His pulse hammered, and with it came the memories. Gunfire. Shouts. The hiss of mortar shells. The screams of men cut down. Marcus's knees nearly buckled as the visions surged. The warehouse blurred. The crowd's roar became battlefield chaos. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't see anything but Williams falling, his eyes wide and desperate. "Bring me home." Marcus staggered, gripping the strap of his duffel like an ancho. "Monsieur." He forced himself to breathe in and out, steady. He couldn't collapse here, not now. Darius smirked, watching him falter. "What's the matter, soldier? Ghosts catching up to you?" The words sliced deeper than any blade. Marcus straightened, forcing his face into stone. The ghosts weren't going away. He knew that now. They would always be with him. But if he was going to survive this, he had to carry them. He dropped the duffel onto the floor outside the circle. The medals rattled faintly inside. A sound lost to the noise of the crowd but sharp in his ears. His throat tightened. The crowd roared again as Darius stepped toward the circle, shrugging off his jacket, rolling his shoulders with deliberate menace. "Tonight," he shouted, "we see if the soldier bleeds like the rest of us." The crowd answered with a thunderous cheer. Marcus stepped forward into the circle. The air grew heavier, every sound sharpened, the hiss of fire, the drip of water from the ceiling, the shuffle of restless feet. The ghosts whispered inside him, clawing at his mind. And as he met Darius's cold stare, Marcus realized this wasn't just a fight. It was a cage made of memory, of ghosts, of everything he had tried to bury. The circle closed around them, a human wall of jeers and hungry eyes. The crowd pressed so tightly that the air itself felt trapped, every breath Marcus took carrying the sour tang of sweat, smoke, and rust. Chains creaked above, and somewhere a bottle shattered, followed by laughter that felt too sharp, too eager. Marcus stared across at Darius. The scarred gang leader rolled his shoulders, muscles flexing beneath the dim firelight. His grin wasn't born of joy but of certainty, the certainty of a man who believed he already owned the outcome. His crew shouted his name, voices rising like a drumbeat of inevitability. Marcus's chest rose and fell in slow, deliberate breaths. His eyes drifted to the floor, the stained concrete slick with years of blood and oil. For a heartbeat, the stains shifted in his vision, becoming the sand-smeared earth of a battlefield. He blinked, but the vision didn't vanish. He could hear it now. The rattle of gunfire, the thud of mortars, the scream of men calling for medics. His hands clenched at his sides. Not here, not now. But the ghosts came anyway. He saw Williams again, the weight of his friend's body pressing into his arms, the blood hot against his palms, the desperate whisper, "Bring me home." The roar of the crowd overlapped with the scream, a sickening harmony that made Marcus's stomach twist. His breath faltered. His knees bent slightly, like the ground itself was trying to pull him back into the past. "Look at him!" Darius shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The soldier shaking in his boots!" Laughter erupted, jagged and merciless. Some clapped, others whistled, the sound a storm beating against Marcus's skull. Marcus straightened slowly, his jaw tightening. He let the laughter wash over him, the sting burning but not breaking him. The fear wasn't weakness. It was memory. And memory was part of him. He inhaled deeply, pulling the ghosts inside, letting them settle into his chest. They would not leave, but neither would he fall. Darius stepped closer, circling like a predator testing the limits of its cage. "I've seen men like you before," he said, his voice low enough to slice under the roar. "Soldiers come home thinking they're lions, but out here you're nothing. Out here you bleed like everyone else." Marcus's eyes followed him, calm, steady, refusing to bite at the bait. But inside his heart pounded so loudly it felt like the crowd could hear it. The first shove came sudden, a hard slap against his chest from Darius's open palm. Marcus stumbled back a step, his boots scraping against the floor. The crowd howled, delighting in the sight. The shove wasn't meant to hurt. It was meant to humiliate. Another came, harder, jolting Marcus, his shoulders. Darius laughed, spreading his arms to the crowd as if already victorious. "See? The soldier's nothing without his gun." Marcus steadied himself, but the battlefield blurred sharper now. Every shove echoed the blast of artillery. Every laugh mirrored the cruel shouts of enemies across the desert. He smelled smoke, not just from the oil drums but from burning villages, seared into his memory. His fists curled. He could almost feel the weight of his rifle again, the strap biting into his shoulder. His training clawed at him. Engage, neutralize, survive. But he forced his arms to stay at his sides. Not yet. Another shove, this one with a fist closed, snapping Marcus's head to the side. His lips split, warm blood trickling down to his chin. The taste was copper, sharp, familiar. Too familiar. The crowd roared, stamping their feet, chanting Darius's name. The sound thundered in Marcus's chest, rattling the cage inside him. And then, in the noise, Marcus heard another voice. Not Williams's this time. His mother's. "Faith will carry you where strength can't." The words cracked something open inside him. His chest heaved, not from fear but from a sudden surge of clarity. He wasn't here for spectacle. He wasn't here for pride. He was here because men like Darius couldn't be allowed to own everything. Not him. Not this city. Not the boy who had warned him. Darius smirked, leaning close, his breath hot and cruel. "Tomorrow, you'll be forgotten,"
Tonight, you're mine. Marcus's eyes locked on his, unflinching now. He whispered so low only Darius could hear. You don't own me. Darius froze for a fraction of a second, the grin faltering. The crowd didn't notice. They were too loud, too hungry. But Marcus saw it, the tiniest crack. The storm inside Marcus shifted. The ghost still circled, but for the first time they weren't dragging him under. They were sharpening him. The warehouse erupted as Darius threw the first punch. A wide, brutal swing meant to crush Marcus's jaw and end the show before it began. But Marcus's body moved before his mind could cat. Chop! He slipped to the side, the fist slicing through empty air. The motion wasn't thought. It was memory. Reflexes drilled into him by years of training, by nights where hesitation meant death. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Darius snarled, spinning to face him. But Marcus's stance was steady now, boots planted, shoulders squared. He wasn't attacking, not yet. But he wasn't prey anymore. The scarred gang leader charged again, fists hammering with wild ferocity. Each strike cracked like thunder in the enclosed space, the air sharp with the sound of flesh meeting flesh, of boots scraping concrete. Marcus blocked one, then another, the shocks reverberating up his arms. The crowd screamed louder, their chants echoing, blurring into battlefield noise. Gunfire, shouts, explosions. Marcus's breath hitched as the warehouse dissolved around him. He was back in the desert, his unit under fire, dust stinging his eyes, his ears ringing with chaos. Every swing from Darius became a bullet he couldn't dodge. Every roar from the crowd became the cries of men he couldn't save. His body shook, but his hands knew what to do. A parry, a pivot, a counterstrike, all muscle memory, all survival. He caught Darius's arm mid-swing, twisting it with brutal precision. The crack of bone or tendon echoed faintly, but Darius wrenched free with a growl, pain flashing across his scarred face. The crowd gasped, then roared louder, their bloodlust stoked by the sight of their leader staggered. Marcus's chest heaved. His fists trembled, not with weakness but with restraint. He didn't want this fight. He had sworn never again. But Darius wasn't giving him a choice. Another swing came, this one lower, aiming for Marcus's ribs. He absorbed the blow, his body rocking with the impact. Pain flared sharp and hot, but it grounded him. The battlefield haze flickered. He wasn't in the desert. He waited, holding Williams as he bled. He was here now, in this cage of rust and fire, fighting not for medals or missions, but for survival. Darius lunged, head low, trying to drive Marcus into the concrete. Instinct surged. Marcus pivoted, his shoulder slamming into Darius's chest, redirecting the charge. The gang leader stumbled, hitting the ground hard enough to rattle the circle. For a heartbeat, silence. Then chaos. The crowd screamed, stamping, fists pounding against oil drums, the sound deafening. Some cheered Marcus, most howled for Darius, but all of them wanted blood. Darius rose slowly, spitting red onto the floor. His grin was gone now, replaced with something colder, darker. He wiped his mouth, his eyes locked on Marcus with murderous intent. "You're gonna regret that," he hissed. Marcus steadied his breath. His knuckles ached, his ribs burned, but his mind was sharper than it had been since he set foot in this cursed place. The ghost still hovered, whispering, clawing, but instead of drowning him, they fueled him. He wasn't fighting for them or against them. He was fighting with them, carrying their weight into each move. Darius charged again, this time with calculated fury, fists snapping with speed and precision honed from years of street brawls. But Marcus's training unfolded like a map. Every strike had a counter, every lunge an opening. He deflected, sidestepped, countered with surgical precision. The crowd's roar dimmed in his ears, replaced with the rhythm of breath, the sharp crack of impact, the beat of survival. Then, a mistake.
Darius swung wide, leaving his side open. Marcus's body reacted instantly. A strike to the ribs, a pivot, a sweep of the leg. Darius hit the floor again, harder this time, the air exploding from his lungs. Marcus froze above him, chest heaving, fist raised for the finishing blow. The crowd leaned in, their screams collapsing into a single unified roar, "Finish him!" But Marcus's fist trembled mid-air, his eyes blurred with memory. He saw not Darius, but the face of an enemy soldier overseas, a boy barely 20, eyes wide with fear as Marcus had disarmed him. He saw the faces of those he'd killed, the ones who haunted his nights. His breath shuddered, his muscles locking. He couldn't. Not yet. Darius coughed, spitting blood, rolling to his knees. His laughter was wet, broken, but chilling. "You ain't strong enough," he rasped. "You'll never be free of it." The words pierced Marcus deeper than any blade, because part of him feared Darius was right. The crowd's chant surged again, hungry, relentless. Marcus lowered his fist slowly, stepping back. His chest burned, his heart pounded, and his vow echoed inside him. He wasn't here to kill. He was here to survive. But as Darius staggered upright, wiping blood from his face, Marcus knew survival alone wouldn't be enough. This was only the beginning. The crowd throbbed like a living organism, their chants pounding against the warehouse walls. Some shouted Darius's name, others screamed for Marcus to be torn apart, but none were silent. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, smoke, and iron, every breath Marcus drew tasting of rust and violence. Darius circled him again, slower now, his grin gone, replaced by the grim focus of a predator wounded, but far from beaten. Blood trickled down from his split lip, dark against his scarred cheek. He flexed his fists, his knuckles raw, his chest heaving with fury. Marcus mirrored him, not by choice, but by instinct. His knees bent, weight balanced evenly, breath controlled. His body knew the rhythm. 1,000 drills, 1,000 sparring matches, the discipline carved into his bones long before this night. He didn't want this fight. He had sworn never to use his training this way again, but the line between vow and survival had blurred into nothing. Darius lunged, throwing a flurry of punches, each one faster, sharper than before. Marcus deflected the first, sidestepped the second, let the third glance off his shoulder. His mind was quiet now, his movements precise, efficient. He wasn't fighting with rage. He was fighting with discipline. The crowd roared as Marcus countered. A clean strike to Darius's ribs, another to his jaw. The blows weren't wild or showy. They were exact, controlled, the kind of strikes designed not for spectacle, but for survival. Darius stumbled, clutching his side, but came back swinging, his fist arcing toward Marcus's head. Marcus ducked under it, pivoted, and swept his leg out, knocking Darius off balance. The scarred leader crashed into the circle's edge, the crowd shoving him back inside with cruel laughter. Marcus's chest rose and fell, steady, measured. His mind flickered with memory. Not the chaos of the battlefield this time, but the drills. The early mornings with his sergeant barking commands. The endless repetition of forms until his body became the weapon. He remembered the way his fists had bruised, his muscles screamed, but his discipline sharpened into something unbreakable. Those years weren't wasted. They had built him for this moment. Darius roared, charging again, his movements wild with fury. He swung left, right, a kick snapping up toward Marcus's ribs. Marcus caught it, twisting sharply, sending Darius crashing to the floor once more. The crowd howled, half in awe, half in rage. Marcus stepped back, giving Darius room to rise. He wasn't here to humiliate, but the restraint only seemed to fuel Darius's anger. "You think this makes you strong?" Darius spat, his voice cracking with rage. "You think discipline gonna save you out here?" He staggered to his feet, fists raised. "This ain't war, soldier boy. This is my house."
Marcus said nothing. Words didn't matter here. Only movement. Only control. The fight surged again, faster, harder. Darius swung with brute strength, but Marcus met him with precision. He absorbed the blows that couldn't be avoided, redirected the ones he could. Each counterstrike clean, efficient. Every motion was honed by years of survival, every movement fueled by the ghosts he carried. The crowd grew restless. They had come for blood, for a messy, savage spectacle. But Marcus wasn't giving them that. His fight was something else. Cold, sharp, disciplined. His strikes were surgical, stripping away Darius's confidence one calculated blow at a time. Darius faltered, chest heaving, his grin replaced by something close to doubt. He looked at Marcus with eyes that saw for the first time, not just a man, but a soldier, one who had walked through fire and returned with a weaponized calm. Marcus's breath slowed. His knuckles ached. His ribs throbbed. But inside, a shift was happening. The ghosts were still there, whispering, clawing, but they no longer drowned him. They moved with him, their weight shaping his strikes, their presence anchoring his will. And for the first time, Marcus realized something terrifying. The training he had buried, the discipline he had sworn never to unleash, was not just his past. It was his edge. The fight wasn't finished. Darius wasn't broken. But Marcus could feel it now, the tide turning. The soldier inside him had awakened. The warehouse shook with noise, the crowd stamping, screaming, their hunger for violence rattling the very steel beams above. Marcus could feel the vibration under his boots, the rhythm of chaos pressing against him. Yet inside, he was unnervingly calm. His breath came steady, his heartbeat steady, his eyes locked on Darius like a scope fixed on target. Darius bared his teeth, chest heaving as he wiped blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. His scar glistened in the firelight, a jagged white slash that made his face look even more vicious. He spat crimson onto the floor and growled, "You don't belong here. I'm going to show them who owns you." Marcus tilted his chin slightly, not answering. His silence enraged Darius more than words ever could. The gang leader roared and charged, fists swinging in furious arcs, the kind of wild, punishing blows that would have crushed a lesser man. But Marcus's body flowed with precision. He slipped one strike, blocked another, felt the sting of a third grazing his ribs, but absorbed it, redirected it. His counters came sharp and exact, a jab to the solar plexus, a hook to the jaw, an elbow to the shoulder joint. Each strike landed with the sound of bone and muscle giving way. The crowd howled louder with every impact. Some screamed Darius's name, desperate to see him rise. Others began to shift, murmuring Marcus's name like a forbidden chant, surprised by the soldier's dominance. Darius stumbled back, his face twisted in fury and disbelief. He swung again, but Marcus caught his wrist mid-air, twisting sharply, forcing the man to his knees. Darius bellowed, the sound more animal than human. Marcus held him there, the soldier's grip unyielding, the memory of 1,000 combat drills guiding his every move. But as Marcus pressed, the ghosts surged again. His vision blurred, and suddenly it wasn't Darius kneeling before him. It was an enemy soldier overseas, young, terrified, begging in a language Marcus couldn't understand. He remembered the decision, the split-second choice to end a life for survival. The memory burned through him, the weight of it pressing harder than Darius's wrist in his hand. He released him, staggering back, chest heaving. The crowd booed, enraged by his restraint. They wanted blood, a finish, but Marcus couldn't cross that line. Not yet. Darius rose slowly, his eyes wild, teeth bared. "You don't got the stomach for it," he spat, his voice breaking with fury. "That's why you'll lose. Out here, mercy is weakness." Marcus steadied his breath, raising his fists again. "And rage is blindness." The words cut sharper than his strikes. Darius roared, charging again, but this time Marcus didn't just defend. He attacked. The soldier's training took full command. Every step was calculated, very strike, placed with brutal efficiency. A jab to the throat, a kick to the knee, a palm strike that snapped Darius's head back. The rhythm built, each motion flowing seamlessly into the next, a symphony of violence orchestrated by discipline. Darius reeled, battered, staggering under the onslaught. The crowd's roar blurred into a single throbbing pulse, the air thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and smoke. Chains rattled above as if the warehouse itself trembled under the storm Marcus had unleashed. But Marcus wasn't untouched. His ribs burned, his lip bled, his fists ached. Every strike reminded him of the toll, of the vow he was breaking with each motion. He had promised never again. And yet here he was, using every ounce of his training, every lesson forged in blood, to survive another battlefield. Darius swung wildly, desperation replacing precision. Marcus ducked low, drove his shoulder into Darius's gut, lifted him with raw strength, and slammed him onto the concrete. The ground shuddered with the impact. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by a deafening roar. Darius coughed, blood flecking his lips, but he forced himself up again. He was too proud, too ruthless to stay down. He stumbled, swayed, then steadied himself, glaring at Marcus with eyes burning through pain. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, Marcus saw fear flicker in Darius's gaze. And for the first time, Marcus realized something terrifying. He wasn't just surviving, he was winning. The warehouse pulsed with noise, the crowd's chants hammering against Marcus's skull. They were no longer unified. Some screamed for Darius, desperate for their leader to reclaim dominance, while others, voices trembling with awe, shouted for the soldier. The division made the air electric, like a storm building, ready to crack the sky open. Marcus stood in the circle, chest heaving, dripping down his temple, mixing with the blood on his lip. His fists throbbed, his ribs burned, but his stance was steady. He had been here before. Not this place, not this circle, but this exact moment. The turning point of battle, when survival demanded surrendering completely to the training carved into bone and blood. Across from him, Darius staggered. His face was a mask of fury and disbelief, scar burning pale against the crimson streaks of blood. He spit again, droplets splattering the concrete, his grin twisted into something vicious and broken. "You think you're winning?" he rasped, his voice cracking. "You ain't winning. You're just showing me what I can take from you." Marcus's eyes narrowed, silence his only response. Darius lunged, fists swinging, his strikes sloppy but powerful, fueled by desperation. Marcus met him, parried, countered. A strike to the ribs, a knee to the gut, an elbow to the temple. Each blow landed sharp, exact, merciless. The crowd gasped at the precision, some clutching their heads as if they could feel the impact themselves. Darius staggered again, dropping to one knee. The firelight flickered over him, painting him small for the first time. Not a monster, not a ruler, just a man, beaten by discipline. Marcus raised his fist, ready to end it. The crowd surged with anticipation, their chants colliding into a single deafening roar. "Finish him! Finish him!" But as Marcus looked down, his vision blurred. It wasn't Darius kneeling before him anymore. It was the enemy soldier from years ago, trembling, young, begging with eyes too human to forget. It was Williams bleeding out, whispering his last words. It was every face Marcus had carried with him across the ocean, every ghost he had buried, but never silenced. His breath hitched. His fist trembled. This wasn't just about Darius. This was about him. About what he became when he let the training take over. Precise, efficient, unstoppable, inhuman. The crowd screamed louder, furious at his hesitation. And Darius, gasping, bleeding, lifted his head, eyes blazing with defiance even as his body wavered. He spat blood onto Marcus's boots and rasped, "You can't do it, can you? You can't finish it. That's why you'll always be weak." The words cut deep, sharper than any blade. Marcus staggered back a step, his fist lowering. He wanted to scream, to strike, to silence the voice that called him weak. But another voice whispered louder inside him, his mother's, faint and fragile. "Faith will carry you where strength can't." He lowered his hand completely. His chest heaved, his jaw clenched, his entire body trembling with the restraint it took not to finish the fight the way the crowd demanded. The noise in the warehouse exploded, some booing, furious at being denied blood, others whispering in awe, recognizing that Marcus's refusal was its own kind of strength. Darius swayed, barely able to stand, but his grin returned, broken and bloodied. "See?" he croaked. "Mercy don't mean you strong. Mercy means I still own you." The warehouse was a graveyard of sound. The chants that had once rattled its steel beams fell into fractured murmurs, some angry, some awestruck, all unsettled. Smoke still curled from the oil drums, dimming the firelight into dull orange glows that flickered weakly against the walls. The circle where Marcus and Darius had fought was stained with blood and sweat, footprints stamped deep into the concrete like scars that would never fade. Marcus stood in the center, his chest heaving, his fists unclenched at last. The adrenaline still surged through him, but beneath it was a hollow ache, deeper than exhaustion. The crowd's voices blurred, distant, like echoes in a dream. He didn't look at them. He couldn't. Their faces weren't the ones haunting him. Darius lay crumpled near the edge of the circle, propped on one elbow, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. His scar gleamed pale against his bruised, swollen face. He spat blood onto the floor, laughed hoarsely and rasped, "This ain't over, soldier. Not till one of us is buried." The words slid into Marcus like ice, but he didn't answer. He had no strength left for words. Silence was the only thing holding him together. Around them, the crowd began to shift. Some turned away, muttering curses under their breath, angry at being denied the blood spectacle they came for. Others lingered, their eyes on Marcus, their whispers sharp and uncertain. The soldier had stood against their leader, had not broken, had not bowed. Fear rippled through them as much as awe. Marcus bent, lifted his duffel, and slung it over his shoulder. The medals rattled faintly inside, a sound that stabbed deeper now, reminding him of the vow he had broken tonight. He had sworn never to use his training this way again. And yet, here he was, bruised, battered, but victorious. As he stepped out of the circle, the crowd parted reluctantly. Some spat at his feet, others simply stepped aside, their gazes lowering. No one dared stop him. He walked with steady strides, each one carrying him farther from the cage, but not from its weight. The ghosts followed still, closer than ever. The night air hit him like a wave as he stepped outside. The drizzle had stopped, but the ground still gleamed wet, reflecting the fractured glow of the street lamps. He breathed deeply, letting the damp air cool his burning lungs. His body trembled now that the fight was over, the adrenaline draining into exhaustion. He walked along the dock, the boards creaking beneath his boots. The water lapped softly against the pilings, a rhythm almost gentle compared to the storm inside him. He dropped onto a wooden crate, elbows on his knees, hands covering his face. For the first time since the fight began, his shoulders shook. Not from fear, not from weakness, from the crushing weight of survival. He had lived through another battle. But what had he sacrificed this time? Footsteps approached. Soft, and he, sitant. Marcus lifted his head slowly. The boy he had seen before, the one who warned him, stood at the edge of the dock. His oversized hoodie clung damply to his skinny frame, his eyes wide, shimmering in the dim light. "You beat him," the boy whispered, voice trembling between awe and fear. Marcus shook his head slowly. His lips split wider as he tried to form the words. "No. Nobody wins tonight." The boy stepped closer, clutching his backpack. "But you didn't die. They all thought you would. They all thought no one could stand against him." His voice cracked with a fragile hope. "But you did." Marcus looked at him, the boy's face barely touched by the world yet already hardened by it. His chest tightened. For a moment he saw himself in those eyes, younger, unscarred, still believing survival could be simple. He wanted to tell the boy not to look at him that way, that he wasn't a hero, that he wasn't someone to admire. He wanted to say he was just another broken man trying not to drown. But the words caught in his throat. Instead he whispered, "Go home. Stay safe. Don't let this place own you." The boy nodded, though his eyes lingered with a kind of desperate admiration Marcus couldn't bear. He turned and disappeared back into the shadows, leaving Marcus alone with the sound of the water and the weight of silence. Marcus leaned back against the crate, eyes on the black water stretching endlessly into the night. For the first time, dawn didn't feel like a promise. It felt like a reckoning, creeping closer with every breath. The dock stretched endlessly into the dark water, a crooked spine of wood and rusting nails. Marcus sat hunched on the crate, the duffel by his side, staring at the water's surface. It rippled faintly, fractured light dancing across it like broken glass. The air smelled of salt, rot, and rain-soaked timber. He inhaled deeply, and it stung. The way air always stung after a battle, too sharp, too real. He pressed his palms together, thumbs digging into his brow. He wanted to pray, but the words wouldn't come. Faith felt slippery in his hands, something he couldn't grip. His mother's voice whispered faintly in his mind, "Faith will carry you where strength can't." But tonight, it had been strength alone that carried him through. Brutal, merciless strength, the kind he had sworn to bury. His fists still ached. He could feel the ghost of every strike echoing through his bones, could still hear the crack of knuckles against flesh. Each sound replayed in his head, overlapping with the screams of another battlefield, another lifetime. He closed his eyes and saw it again. Williams in his arms, whispering his last words, his blood seeping into the sand. Marcus's chest constricted. He pressed a hand against it, as though he could hold the ghosts inside, keep them from breaking free. But they slipped through anyway, filling the night with shadows only he could see. A gull cried overhead, sharp and lonely, then vanished into the dark. Marcus lifted his head, eyes burning. He didn't cry. The war had burned that reflex out of him long ago. But the ache behind his eyes was worse than tears. It was the ache of emptiness, of realizing victory didn't heal. It only scarred deeper. He reached for the duffel, unzipped it, and pulled one of the medals into his hand. The metal was cold, damp from the drizzle. He turned it over in his palm, its polished surface catching the faint light. Once, this medal had meant honor, had meant sacrifice remembered. Now it felt like a weight pulling him further down. "What did I really win tonight?" he whispered to no one. The medal gave no answer. Footsteps echoed faintly across the dock. Marcus stiffened, his hand instinctively curling into a fist before he even looked up. But it wasn't Darius or his men. It was an older man, his back bent, hauling a fishing net over one shoulder. His clothes were worn, his hands calloused, his face hidden beneath, the shadow of a cap. He stopped when he saw Marcus, his eyes narrowing slightly, scanning the bruises, the split lip, the tension in his shoulders. He didn't speak at first, just studied him the way men who've lived long lives study storms. with recognition. "You fought tonight," the old man said finally, his voice raspy, carrying both judgment and pity. Marcus didn't answer. The old man sighed, shifting the net on his shoulder. "This dock's seen more fights than fish these days. But you—" He shook his head slowly. "You ain't from here. You carry war on your back." Marcus's jaw tightened. "And you don't?" The man's eyes softened, but only slightly. "We all do. Just different kinds." He looked out over the water, silent for a long moment, then muttered, "Be careful, soldier. Men who fight too long forget who they are when the fight ends." He turned and shuffled away, disappearing down the dock, his figure swallowed by the mist. Marcus stared after him, the words settling heavy in his chest. Forget who you are when the fight ends? He already feared that was true. Tonight, he hadn't been Marcus Hale, son, brother, man searching for peace. Tonight, he had been the soldier again. Precise, disciplined, ruthless. He dropped the medal back into the bag, zipped it shut, and sat back. The horizon glimmered faintly, the first pale streaks of dawn cutting through the dark. The light touched the water, thin and fragile, but persistent. Marcus exhaled, long and uneven. He had survived the night. But as dawn crept closer, he wondered if survival alone would ever be enough. The eastern sky bled from black into a muted grey, then to streaks of pale pink and gold. Dawn crept slowly over the docks, spilling across the water in fractured beams. The light felt almost unreal, too gentle after the night's brutality. Marcus sat still on the crate, shoulders slumped, watching the horizon stretch open. He hadn't slept, couldn't. His body ached from every strike, his ribs throbbed, his fists were raw, but none of it compared to the deeper wound gnawing inside him. He should have felt relief. He was alive. He had stood against Darius and walked out. But relief didn't come. Only emptiness. A hollow echo in his chest, as though the fight had stripped something more from him than flesh or blood. The water reflected the rising sun, shimmering like fire on the waves. Marcus stared at it, his thoughts drifting. He remembered standing on the deck of a transport ship years ago, watching the sun climb over the ocean before they reached foreign soil. Back then, dawn had meant duty, meant a mission waiting. Now, dawn felt like a question he couldn't answer. Footsteps padded softly on the dock. Marcus turned, expecting another stranger, another warning. Instead, it was the boy. The same skinny frame, the oversized hoodie. But in the light of morning, his face seemed smaller, more fragile. He held his backpack tight, his eyes darting nervously around as though Darius's men might appear at any moment. Marcus sighed, lowering his gaze. "Didn't I tell you to stay home?" The boy stepped closer, stubborn despite his fear. "I had to see." His voice cracked, caught between awe and worry. They said you broke him." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Nobody broke. We both walked away." The boy shook his head fiercely. "No. Nobody ever walks away from Darius. Not till you." His voice softened, almost a whisper. "You gave us hope." The word struck Marcus harder than any punch Darius had landed. Hope. He didn't feel like hope. He felt like a ghost, dressed in bruises, clinging to survival by instinct alone. "You don't want to put your hope in me," Marcus said, his voice rough. "I'm not who you think I am." The boy tilted his head, studying him with eyes too sharp for his age. "You're a soldier. You fight for something. That's more than anyone else here does.
Marcus's chest ached. He wanted to argue, to tell the boy he didn't fight for anything anymore, that he had left that part of himself on foreign soil. But the words stuck in his throat, because deep down, he knew last night hadn't just been about survival. When he stood against Darius, when he refused to bow or break, it had meant something. Not to him, maybe, but to the people who had watched. To this boy. He rubbed a hand over his face, weary. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, then said softly, "Eli." Marcus nodded slowly. "Eli, you need to understand something. Fighting doesn't make you strong. Surviving doesn't make you free. Sometimes it just makes you lost." Eli hugged his backpack tighter. "But you're still here." The simple words cut through Marcus's defenses. He looked at the boy. Really looked at him. The fear hiding under the admiration, the way his thin shoulders carried too much weight already. Marcus saw himself, years younger, standing on the porch of his mother's house, hungry for someone to show him the way. The dock creaked as Marcus stood, lifting the duffel onto his shoulder. His body protested with every movement, but he steadied himself. He looked east, at the sun breaking free from the horizon. The light spread wider, stronger, touching the city in golden hues that made even the broken buildings look almost whole. Marcus exhaled slowly. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted. His voice was softer now, but steady. "But if I'm still here, maybe that means I get to choose." Eli's eyes widened, a flicker of cautious hope shining in them. Marcus turned toward the street, his boots echoing softly against the wet wood. Eli followed a few steps behind, quiet but present, like a shadow refusing to let go. The city loomed ahead, scarred but alive, waiting. For the first time since he stepped off the bus, Marcus didn't feel like he was walking into enemy territory. He was walking into possibility. Fragile, uncertain, but real. Dawn spread brighter across the sky, and with it came a whisper of something Marcus hadn't dared feel in years. Not victory, not peace, but the faintest trace of rebirth.